Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's session in our Interstellar Insights series, celebrating the global launch of my new book, What Space Got to Do with It? An Interstellar Guide to Success. This book is more than a continuation, it's a call to activate the potential we all carry. While the first volume introduced 10 life lessons for personal growth, this second book shifts from reflection to implementation. It distills over 35 years of experience in the global space ecosystem and draws on conversations with over 200 thought leaders who are shaping the future on Earth and beyond. An Interstellar Guide to Success translates powerful space based principles like systems thinking, visionary leadership, and strategic collaboration. It translates them into real world strategies for entrepreneurs, educators, policymakers, and emerging leaders. And I've organized it in four core pillars: leadership, awareness, access, and then action. Each one is essential for navigating change and creating impact in a complex world. Today's session brings together insights from three of those chapters across the pillars, from self leadership and mentoring to data powered awareness and trust based ecosystems. Our conversation will explore the diverse yet interconnected pathways to purpose driven leadership. And I'm honored to be joined by three extraordinary global changemakers whose stories are featured in the book. These three leaders come from different sectors, disciplines, and regions, but they share a common thread: they're catalysts. They lead with integrity. They lift others as they rise, and they transform insight into action. I hope today's conversation sparks some fresh thinking, offers practical wisdom, and empowers you to take the next bold step on the leadership journey. So let's begin. I'm going to start with what an honor it is to welcome Her Excellency, Dr. Amina Gharib Fakim, the former president of Mauritius, pioneering diversity scientist, and a tireless global advocate for advancing women in science and leadership. Welcome, Your Excellency. It's such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shelli, for having me. And also congratulations on this fantastic initiative.
Thank you. And President Amina is featured in chapter one, which is about leadership, and her journey powerfully demonstrates how leading with purpose, grounded in both scientific insight and civic responsibility, can shape not only national identity, but global partnerships. Her presidency broke barriers, and her continued work bridges worlds: science and policy, local impact and global vision, personal excellence, and public service. Thank you again, President Amina, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you.
So next, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Catherine Nakalibi, the NASA Harvest Africa Program Director and a globally recognized expert in remote sensing and geospatial analytics for food security and climate resilience. Welcome, Dr. Catherine.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and be a part of this incredible initiative with you.
Thank you again. Now, Dr. Catherine is highlighted in chapter four, which is about awareness and the power of role models. Catherine's story is a shining example of how scientific innovation, when paired with lived experience and leadership, can drive change when it's needed most. Her work empowers governments, farmers, and global institutions with the data to make informed decisions, and she stands as a powerful role model for rising scientists and changemakers around the world. Thank you again, Dr. Catherine, for joining us.
I'm excited, absolutely. And I personally believe that advanced technology has the ability to serve those who need it the most. And the farmers who are on the front lines of climate extremes are my core focus area. And through satellite data and AI, I want to turn cutting edge science into practical solutions that can enhance food security and build resilience.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait to dive into that more, as well as share more of your wonderful insights from NASA Harvest. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Hannah Ashford, the Managing Director of the Carmen Project and a visionary leader building bridges across the global space community. Welcome, Hannah. I'm so honored you could join us.
Thank you so much for having me, Shelli. And yeah, I'm very humbled to be here alongside such distinguished professionals and speakers. And I'm also looking forward to hearing all of your stories. So thank you, Shelli.
Well, thank you, Hannah. And Hannah is featured in chapter seven, which is about access, Purpose-built pathways. Hannah's work exemplifies how trust, collaboration, and bold leadership can create new entry points into the space ecosystem. She leads with empathy and strategy, curating global dialogues, connecting emerging and established leaders, and fostering a culture of access that extends far beyond borders. Thank you again, Hannah, for joining us.
Absolute pleasure.
Well, now let's dive into the heart of our conversation. Each of you brings a unique lens from different chapters of the book, and today we're going to explore how your leadership journeys, insights, and actions intersect to create real-world impact. So we'll begin, as always, with your personal leadership journey, and then explore key themes from each of your chapters: leadership, awareness, and action, through questions that invite both reflection and dialogue. So we'll jump into that first question. Please share your leadership journey. What inspired you to lead in your field? And how has your leadership evolved over time? President Amina, I'd love to start with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelli. Well, I think, first of all, it's been really spelled out in the chapter that you have. I'll just take you through very, very quickly. I come from Mauritius. I was born in a very small village in Mauritius with hardly any infrastructure. At the time, I was actually, of course, a child. But I had very, very devoted and loving parents who actually gave me an education. Why I stress on this? Because education was not free at the time, and it was an economic choice. And of course, most families chose to actually educate the boys because it made economic sense. Because the narrative was such that the girl would get married off and will serve the in-laws, whereas the boys will serve their parents. So I went to a convent school. By faith, I am Muslim, and I went to a Christian surrounding. Of course, I was educated by teachers who were coming from Ireland, and interestingly, this is when I got infected by the virus of science because the school was very new. There was no infrastructure, and I was taught science in situ, in real life situation. And that was really a game changer because I could understand the impact that science has on everyday life. You know, when you're a child, when you're growing up and you're told that you're doing science when you're washing up, or you're doing science when you're cooking. I mean, that is really transformative. Then I went to high school, and I took, of course, the science option. And then towards the end of my high school days, my father said to me, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go further studies. Because interestingly, there is a gap when we finish high school, but before you go to college, there is a gap of about 9 months because our system doesn't actually coincide. So I took a position, of course, in a ministry. And I said to my father, I'm sorry, father, but I cannot imagine myself doing this for the rest of my life. I recognize, of course, it's a very important job, but it wasn't for me. So he said to me, what do you want to do? I said, I want to follow my passion, which was chemistry. So we chose a university that would offering sandwich courses. That means I could take 1 year out in industry. And these were what shaped really my career into the sciences further. It solidified it. But I would like to say something before. Before I went to college, I went to see the career guidance officer. And I said to him, he looked at me, of course, a waif, a very thin girl walking through the door. And he said to me, what do you want to do science? Science is not for you. Science is for boys. And I would advise you to revise your decision. And also, when you come back to Mauritius, there'll be no job for you because we are not there yet. So that was the advice I got from the career guidance officer. I went home. I said to my father, that's what I want to do. And I went, did a degree, a bachelor's degree, and then eventually got a scholarship to do a PhD, following that passion, following that chemistry that I was so passionate about, but still not knowing what to do with it. And then I came back. I was all set to go to the United States to do a postdoc, but I didn't go. And no regrets there. And I came back and I joined the university, joined academia, and again, not knowing what I was going to do with my chemistry. Then there was a project, of course, a chance will smile at you only once. And I joined the bandwagon of a regional project, which was funded by the European Development Fund. I fell into the pot of medicinal plant, herbal medicine, and I made a career out of it. And then by the time I was finishing, I was climbing the ladder. I became the first woman professor in my university. And I climbed that ladder, and I realized by the end that I was not going to get the post of vice chancellor, but I was not going to end up in the graveyard of university administration. So I took the leap into the unknown and used my research data to actually create a business. And so the business was working, was doing quite well. I was employing young graduate. I was creating the space for women graduate. Interesting, at some point, we were 100% female in my group, and not by design, totally by accident, because I found something among women. They are very dedicated. They really work hard and they give the best of themselves. Because, at the end of the day, Shelli, we still have to prove ourselves in this world. And the woman portfolio has to be, in my opinion, 5 times bigger than that of a man moving up. And then in 2014, while I was still minding my own business, all the negatives, which were, of course, stacked against me when I was in academia, became positive in the political world. And I tick all the boxes. I tick the boxes of women, Muslim, because Islam is a minority in Mauritius. I ticked the box of not being I have not had a political past, and I ticked the box of a woman as well. So all these added together was a very powerful package to present to the people. And interestingly, I went to TED to give a talk in 2015, and when I came back, a journalist said to me, ma'am, your name has been cited for president. I said, you must be mistaken because I have no political ambition. But if you say, she said, can you say in form of a statement? I said so. I said, I have no political ambition. And the next day, being a good reporter, what does she do? She puts my name for president, small interrogation mark. People don't see the interrogation mark. They just see my name for president. It became the sounding board. And lo and behold, they went for election with my name. Of course, there was a lot of pushback from many quarters. And then one December 2014, when I was in office, watching, of course, the counting the vote, and I turned off my laptop and I said, Amina, you shall be president. So that was it. There was no planning. There was only driven by passion, driven also by the appetite for taking risk, because no business school will teach any woman to take risk, let alone, go out there and start a business. But all this was made possible by the fact that I had parents who believed in me, and I had a very big cheerleader. He was my father, and he will always say to me, there is nothing that you can't do if you put your mind to it, because you have enough intelligence to do that. So with that confidence building, I went ahead and I did just that. It was driven through passion. It was driven through hard work. There is no going around the fact that you have to work hard, put in the effort. And also, there is something that we must never compromise on. It's the essence of driving for quality. Because when your paper is being evaluated out there, you are actually evaluated for your competence, for what you produce in terms of quality. So quality knows no gender. So go for quality, go for high value, go, of course, for what you enjoy doing, because all this comes through at the end of the day. So this is, in a nutshell, what my career has been.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency. That was a wonderful career journey. Dr. Catherine, we'd love to hear your leadership journey.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to hear that long journey, and there are lots of snippets and things in there that I absolutely relate to and have experienced, but at different dimensions, I guess, and different geography. But so I'm originally from Uganda. I was born and raised in Kampala, and I went all the way through my undergraduate to the university in Uganda, Makerere University, before I went on to do my master's at Johns Hopkins University and my PhD at the University of Maryland, where I'm now an assistant professor in the Department of Geographic Sciences. It's a short story, but it's a really long story because it's a story of overcoming and constantly improving myself, but at the same time working through really complicated or unclear directions. So my dad is a car mechanic to this day. My sons believe he can fix anything. I don't know if he can fix an electric car. But my mom owns a restaurant. We call it a restaurant in quotes because it's basically a shop where you can get French fries and chicken. And it's that business that managed to get me and my sisters through high school and become who we are today. And I did at the time when I was going to begin my undergraduate, I by chance ended up switching to environmental science because it was the program that I did get a scholarship for. Without that scholarship, I would not have been able to go to university because my parents did not have the resources to pay for private education. And I would say a combination of me, or what makes me me, is a couple of things. One is I'm a tinkerer like my dad, so I like to learn new things. And by default, a lot of the things that I do today, they're completely unrelated to where I grew up or who I am, but deeply also connected to where I grew up, who I am, and who my parents are. The other thing is I'm like my mother. My mother is very entrepreneurial, so there's a lot of creativity there. But at the same time, she continues to work every day for her family to make sure that everybody's provided for. At the same time, a strength and a pillar in our family. Another side of it is step by step. So if I'd set out when I was young and said that I was going to be a pilot, that would not be a thing. Or an astronaut, that would not be a thing. I didn't have that type of role model in my family. But because every day I'd see my dad fix one car after another, and I'd see my mom grow her business slowly, one chicken at a time. At the same time, being humble and being approachable by everybody from my extended family is sort of this realization that with the little you have, you can build towards something better. So us going through school and getting, much higher education than they both did is a testament to that. The other thing is that no work, I sometimes use the words is beneath you or beneath me. At everything that you can do, there's an opportunity to learn something. So I've been an aerobics instructor, I've worked in a movie studio, I've done graphics editing, and all those things come together in many ways, like how I prepare my PowerPoints or when I'm trying to think of a way of presenting a story. All of those things are part of me. And so I guess one of the pivot points in my life is where we have to think of everybody deserving an opportunity. So when I finished my undergraduate, went on to Johns Hopkins University, and then started doing my PhD, I had a conversation with my PhD advisor and he asked me, where are you from? I told him where I'm from and what I wanted to do, that I wanted to learn the best technology, apply it to a problem back home. And through him, I was connected back home to Uganda. And I'd say in this encounter, this experience was that he gave me an opportunity to try something. I had no idea how I was going to do it, but he gave me the opportunity, opened the door, and behold, so many other things unfolded in that process. And then I think it's that story too talks about taking chances on people, and this in my leadership style or in how I work with students who later on become a part of my team or my group, who I later on depend on to help me with trainings or research or field work, etc. Is that when we're starting out, we might not know exactly what we're going to do, what we're going to be, what skills we might have, what skills we might develop. But if somebody opens the door, gives you a chance, and you're ready to prepare and work hard, I think paths can go in many different ways. And I think that is basically my story, coming from environmental science to focusing on agriculture, monitoring, and research, and then being able to do this research and work supporting programs, not only back home in Uganda, but working across multiple African countries and supporting a lot of capacity building programs, is a testament to sort of all those things kind of coming together. And I'm excited to hear what Hannah's story is.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Catherine. That was an amazing journey. And thank you for introducing, obviously, Hannah to share her journey as well. Welcome, Hannah, again.
Thank you so much, Shelli. It's so fascinating to hear everybody's stories. I'm really wowed by what I've heard already. So yeah, look, for me, it's sort of curious to reflect on being considered a leader in, a sector like space where, it wasn't that long ago where I didn't necessarily think that I had, something to contribute to space or could really forge a future in space. And unlike my colleagues here who have just spoken, I didn't grow up thinking about a career in STEM or science. To be honest, my brain wasn't, overly wired that way. I was very much on the sort of humanities side of things, and I just had never considered that this was a career that would be possible to me. And I think as a result, that has really been reflected in now what I find myself focusing on, which is often sort of those in between people or people in the fringes, or ensuring that we have access to opinions which don't necessarily form sort of what we come across in our everyday. And I think that that's incredibly important to create spaces. So, I mean, looking back on my career, I suppose it's really always been framed around people at the center. I care deeply about people and humans and really understanding the human drivers behind certain, factors that all of us encounter within, whether it's our sectors or our day-to-days, our industries. Um, and that's really been a common thread that has stayed with me. So I started my career in law. So I studied law and journalism, and that really came from a very genuine curiosity to really understand the structures that exist within society, and understanding, how different elements of, norms or behaviors are sort of underpinned at that societal level. This was particularly in an Australian context where I am based at the moment, looking into First Nations, legal systems, and then also how our society is essentially working to close the gap through very, considered systemic approaches. And that's been something, that was, to be honest, where I thought my career would take me. I would sort of follow that path. But I always also had this very, strong desire to understand international environments and see how things were working across the world. So after starting my career working as a lawyer here in Australia, I moved over to Germany, to Berlin, intending to stay 1 year, where I ended up staying 6 years. And similar to what Catherine said, in that career transition, I went from having a very stable job as a lawyer to going into Berlin and just sort of working in different jobs just while we were sort of getting our visas sorted and getting getting set up in a new country. And I ended up landing in sort of the world of innovation and disruptive technology. And of course, that's where among the portfolio of different, tech and leaders who I was working with in that role, I discovered space. And for me, again, it was quite curious. I'd never considered, the true extent of the space sector and the way in which it underpins everything. And I mean, that's something that I think was really well captured just a couple of weeks ago by the UN Deputy Secretary General. And she stated that space is not the final frontier, it's the foundation of our present. And that's a learning that I went through when I was in Berlin. And I really started to become cognizant of just how much of an enabling role space technologies were playing in so many of the most time critical challenges that we're facing on Earth. And, once I started to form that understanding through people being very kind to me and really taking me under their wing, and also encouraging me in terms of, that there are other perspectives that need to be brought into the sector to ensure that it is, inclusive and thoughtful of different, different perspectives. Once I started to sort of become conscious of all of this, I was just absolutely hooked on space. So I also am a person very sort of obsessed, for better and for worse, with geopolitics and international relations and understanding how all of these things work. So essentially, through that world, I came into contact with some brilliant leaders who were starting the Carmen Project. They invited me to be part of that journey. And where things stand today, we're a nonprofit foundation working headquartered in Germany, but working with leaders from 70 nations worldwide. And again, it really comes down to people, which is that common thread for me throughout my career. So we work with people on an individual level, decision makers who really have a good lens into what is happening globally in space, and importantly, who are well positioned to use that influence to change things and ensure that we're being very proactive in how we shape that future of space. So we work with them on different types of projects. We create safe spaces for dialogue to ensure that people can come together just as people who care about the future of space. And yeah, I think that that's sort of something that still really drives me every day to day. I just have this very genuine curiosity of what's happening across the world, how people are considering and navigating their challenges. Again, I find it quite interesting. Her Excellency Dr. Amina just said before that, she had no political ambition. And what I found in my work is that I think that those are often the best leaders. It's people who are curious and who are leading through service and through, ensuring that they are well informed. She also mentioned quality. So I think if you're informed by quality, by passion, you're happy to move into a servant leadership role. And also if you exercise intellectual humility, so really understanding what you don't know, and leaning into other experts to help guide you to make decisions accordingly. I think that all of these things are very, very powerful. And, I've been, a very grateful and lucky recipient of many people helping me and guiding me throughout my career. And ultimately, they're the types of environments that we really try to create for the fellows and leaders within our programs, is just fostering this very genuine curiosity and spaces for people to lift each other up through knowledge. I think knowledge is power, and it's a way that we, act on that knowledge and exercise that, which really matters. So yeah, lots of human elements in the work I do, and yeah, I find myself working in a sector that I never thought I would be in, but challenges me every single day.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for sharing your journey. And I think that would be really insightful for all our listeners. Now, we're going to open up with the question phase of this, which is about, and we'll go through different kind of themes for each question. So, our next question is about leading with purpose across sectors. Now, you've each led across scientific, diplomatic, and entrepreneurial ecosystems. How do you stay grounded in your purpose while adapting to different roles and platforms? President Amina, I'd love for you to start.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelli. Again, as I said, you have to have your own ideals you believe in. And I have always believed in the transformative power of science, so I was driven by this. When I was at university, I believed into what was being shared with me by these grandmothers who believed firmly in traditional medicine. And I made a career out of trying to validate what they were trying to say by putting the scientific framework around it. And then when I went into office, I realized again, you have to put yourself, these ideals that you have that you want to drive. And when I was there, again, I was lucky because when I came into office, it was 2015. I come in as a woman with a background in science, no politics, entrepreneurial. And there were two major decisions which were taken in 2015, the last quarter of 2015. There was, of course, the endorsement by the United Nations of the SDGs. And there was also, of course, in November 2015, the very first successful COP, where countries realized that climate change is an issue and impacting, and of course, everybody came together around the theme to say we should not go beyond 1.5 degrees warming. But September 2015 was when United Nations, perhaps for the first time, recognized the centrality of science and how, if you look at all the SDGs, we realize that science, of course, is central to it. And then if you bring in the gender component in it, and again, something I keep saying that a bird cannot fly with one wing, you bring in the gender, you bring in the need for education, because this was what was missing in the MDGs. But here we find that education is key. And this, of course, speaks to my own background, having had an education, believing into an ideal that, you want to actually bring to the table, and also helping the girl child, because I always say that if you are going to make changes, I mean, just think of Uganda, just think of Kampala and Tebe, think of Mauritius and small, think of many small villages right across Africa where there's so much potential, but the science has not been adapted to that, to the education system of that child. So make that education relevant to them and take the girl child by the hand. And that is something that I'm giving myself. Again, another ideal is to try to do something, not just for the girl child, also for the woman entrepreneur. Why women entrepreneur? Because if you look at the number of women who are employed, they are employed essentially in the informal sector. Now, just think of the power that this can bring to any economy if you really help these women, of course, go mainstream. When I say go mainstream, give them all the facilities that men usually have. And this is something that I'm giving myself this kind of passionate about, to try to bring to the table the need to really empower women. And in Africa, there are many sectors that will really transform the livelihoods of so many people, families. And one sector, of course, we know agriculture, and agriculture is central to ensuring not just food security, but of course, a food sovereignty, because we need to start growing what we eat and eat what we grow. So these are messages that we have to keep bringing to the table, bringing the notion, of course, empowerment of all empowerment, putting the women, of course, with technology, because through technology, through access to, to, let's say, mobile money, for example, how much you can contribute. So this has been really what has driven me right across is, you have your ideal, you have your dream, but of course you need to action. Otherwise, it just becomes, just empty, nothing there. So that has been what has driven me. And now, again, in my fourth life, if I may call it that way, I found that there is a space actually to bring the changes that we want through empowerment, through knowledge. And I'm very happy to hear that Hannah has mentioned the fact that knowledge is power. It's very true. How to bring it to these people. And I think I occupy a unique space to be able to do just that. So I'm doing just that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Your Excellency. Dr. Catherine, I'd love to get your thoughts on how do you stay grounded in your purpose while adapting to different roles and platforms?
Thank you so much. And thanks, President Amina and Hannah. Actually, some of the things you mentioned kind of tie to what keeps me grounded. One, being interested in what's happening across the world is really important, particularly for the subject that I study, or my topic area. You could think about environment, agriculture, resilience, in our interconnected world, and how one thing that happens in one place can, cascade into food insecurity in one region. Hannah also mentioned people, and how this is so important. And Dr. Amin talked about how sometimes technology or facilities or applications are not suited to a particular geography. So this is, some of the things that I grapple with. And for me, what keeps me grounded is along those lines. One is the meaning, is like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And constantly like reflecting back to what does it mean in the grand scheme of things? Like, what is my technology? What could my technology change about somebody's existence beyond myself? I constantly think about that, and sometimes find myself doing things that have nothing to do with my, promotable work, which is writing papers and publishing, and just working to potentially help somebody improve their CV or help somebody communicate something that they're working on, because that will be tangible to me because I can see direct impact in their life, as a result of just this, few 5 minutes or so talking about this particular thing that they care about. The other thing is my family. So who I am and always being true to that. So my people that know me very well think that I'm like a chameleon. I morph into the environment that I'm in. So if you find me in my parents' house, you find me hanging out with my dad and arguing with him nonstop about stuff. So he argues I should look under the hood of my car because, you cannot drive a car without looking under the hood. And I tell him I need to know that my computer has battery because that's my car, and these conversations are just, sometimes they seem like so far from the reality of what I need to be doing, but they're important because they keep me connected to who I am. I've, observed my dad throughout my life doing this. The other is just the reflection and knowing, especially in the work that I do around capacity building, is that capacity building is not infrastructure. It's not only buildings and structures that we walk into if we're talking about technology. It is actually the people that are empowered to use the technology, because we cannot pass that power for the machines to decide what is important. It is the people who are able to, let's say, run the model, design the spacecraft, do the protein analysis to cure some disease, for example. So if we have people empowered, and this goes to Dr. Amina's point around education, we educate the people who face the problems, they would come up with solutions related to that problem that other people would not actually consider as a problem because it doesn't affect them. And so reflecting on that is like what matters the most. in a society or community to an individual varies significantly. And so trying to be immersed in a particular community or environment allows me to observe. I spent a month in Madagascar this past January, and just being in a cacao field and observing, what people do on a daily basis is very different than me trying to analyze data on cacao-driven deforestation, because it actually isn't. I'm just observing it from space and not understanding what's actually happening on the ground. And then another thing that keeps me grounded, or it's like a method for me to stay grounded, is being able to communicate the shortcomings or the things that we tend, people tend to make flashy about technology, space, satellites, AI, etc. And just being honest about what they can truly do for our everyday life is very different for everybody. So our current obsession is like, oh my God, it's going to change everything. But if you look at fundamentally what we're using it for and the problems we face, is very different, right? Me summarizing my email or constructing an email has nothing to do with providing food to a particular region. So being able to identify that there's still a huge gap between what we're developing, why we're developing it, or what we could do if we're trying to go all the way down to the communities or villages that are facing, who are on the front line of extreme events that we face. And so trying to strip away the technical language to hide under the misguidedness or the shortcomings of technology is something that I try to avoid a lot. And working really, really hard to adapt methods to different geographies is also core to myself, in the sense that while we might have a global product for deforestation mapping or agriculture conditions assessment, etc., once you zoom into a specific, let's say, village in Morocco, you might find that that data set is completely missing an entire village. And that's because fundamentally who developed it, developed it for a completely different reason than for the community in Morocco that might live in the desert where they grow agriculture that doesn't actually fit the paradigm of what agriculture should look like. And so those are some of the things that I think I constantly remind myself, why am I doing this? What is wrong with what I'm doing, and what are the shortcomings, and because it's very easy to overpromise what we can do, because not a lot of people understand fundamentally what goes into making the technology sausage in this particular case.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Catherine. That was all of you are incredible. So we're going to pivot into another themed area about turning awareness into action. And you all kind of mentioned that it's great to create awareness, but we have to have some action. So Catherine, your chapter focuses on data and insights and how they can transform into and help decision making. How can awareness be used not only to inform, but to activate global change?
Thanks for this question. It's one of my favorites. So it's also built on my point about awareness. If you think about a particular community as to what is the core, most important thing that they are doing to survive, if you think of it when you are completely removed from that community's everyday life, it's very easy to judge. And it's very easy for you to develop your method, your data set, or your satellite system to completely question what they do, judge what they do, and perpetuate, the harm that they have already experienced. And so, however, when you are working on a problem and are trying to identify a solution that maybe comes, halfway, is to first understand what are the options available to a community. So I'm always thinking about this. Sometimes call it a frontier where agriculture is, going into forests, for example. If you go and stand in a region where there's smallholder farmers, where they're growing, let's say, maize, and season after season, the field fails, and the only thing that they have might be to go harvest that tree, turn it into charcoal, and sell it so they can provide food for their family. It's very easy to judge them as not valuing that tree in the forest. However, if you understand that they have no other alternative, then you need to think about your technology differently. It's like, what is something else? What is an alternative that can be brought to help this community feed their future, nourish their future without undermining the forest. And so just thinking about like this interconnectedness and going backwards rather than coming from a technology standpoint and pointing fingers is something that is absolutely really, really important. But at the same time, technology and data have such power around awareness. So, giving my example from Madagascar again, at this workshop with farmers, and I spent, 3 weeks with them going around just observing and looking at things and, understanding all the labor that goes into cacao. We get our chocolate and enjoy it, but we don't really understand fundamentally what goes into making it arrive at our tables. And at the end of it, I explained, this is what I've been doing. I apologize for wasting all your time. I just wanted to observe day to day, because when we look at this region from above, it looks like there's extensive deforestation that is happening. And here's some maps that show what is happening in your region. And, through this discussion, we talked about some of the issues that the farmers who are agroforest farmers are facing and how they would like to address these problems. And we discussed things like, well, because of this fragmentation where cacao fields are getting more and more boundaries due to rice growing in the region, this is extending the area where mold is happening, which is affecting your fields. And they're like, we want to address this, but we don't have the means. We don't own the land next to us. We cannot control that. So if this information and knowledge went backwards, how would we address that problem? The farmers are aware, they understand the challenges, because I did not know about the mold as a boundary thing. I was just observing mold everywhere. And they're like, well, if you look on the edges, there's more mold than in the middle. And so showing the data and showing the change over time using images from satellites enabled me to have a conversation. But at the same time, because they had seen me, observed me, we had this very different conversation than we would have had if I'd come, with the mentality of I've mapped this whole area. You've lost X, Y, Z, area of forest. There's a lot of change here and here, and these are the problems. You need to solve this problem. So kind of thinking about it that way created not only awareness for myself, but as well as awareness for the community. And then we use data to sort of be the conversation builder. And when you hear a farmer being like, this is exactly the type of thing we need, we want to understand what affects productivity, because we're operating in a way that is, day after day after day. And so in that moment, you think about other ways that you can integrate technology with the everyday needs and requirements of that community, as well as the limitations in that environment, because farmers don't have smartphones. Then how do you deliver information? So there's like so many things that can unravel that. Then you think about my black hole, my favorite talking point, which is technology, people, and then there's a black hole in between. So there's no linkage or connection. So those are some of the things that I think, for me, just being aware as an individual of the capabilities that are available, but at the same time being aware of fundamentally where the person who would love to have the most impact, my mother who grows maize, how there's such a huge gap that I cannot convince her to do something because I won't bring the solution to the problem. Like I'm not going to build an irrigation system and sustain it over long term. It's something that I'm aware of and realize and try to think of other ways that we can bridge that gap.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Hannah, you work closely with emerging leaders at the intersection of awareness and action. How have you seen awareness spark leaders or opportunities in your global community building efforts?
Yeah, again, so much to sort of grow on based on what Catherine was just speaking to as well there. But I mean, look, when I think about the type of leaders who I hope are in, the driver's seats, uh, I think about, I want to see robust leaders, I want to see well-informed leaders. And that means that, people need to have regional awareness. They need to have disciplinary awareness, topical awareness, global awareness. There are so many, pieces of the puzzle that I believe people need to proactively seek to understand in order to be an effective leader. And, this is particularly the case in the space sector, right? Where we have decisions which can impact not only geographies across the world, but indeed generations to come. And just last week I was with some colleagues, and one of them made this point that, in the space sector, we're at a true inflection point where we have the opportunity to shape things and to do things correctly, understanding that there's many different sort of forms that that could take. And for example, this was a window that we somehow missed when it came to climate and taking very decisive action as a collective on sustainability measures at a time when it would have been far more effective for us to do so, right? And what we have with the space sector is sort of this moment where we know what's happening. We can see the amount of increased activity. We can also see the proliferation of challenges that comes with that. And in my eyes anyway, I think that it's incumbent upon, all of the people who are making decisions in space to ensure that they are doing that in the most, robust and well-informed manner that they can be. So I mean, when I look at the, what we're sort of doing and what I've seen, it's important for us to ensure that, the top leaders from different regions are genuinely cognizant of what is happening in other regions in terms of the priorities and challenges. One can't be making those types of decisions, which can have the impacts I just spoke to, in a vacuum. And indeed, what we found, early in the piece was, for example, one of our fellows, he's a top leader coming from the United States, working at a very, very high director VP level at one of the most influential companies in the world. And he had been in that leadership position for 11 years and hadn't really interacted with anybody outside of the United States. And he was fascinated, to come into our community and to, really deeply understand what his colleagues in Kenya, Rwanda, Costa Rica, Australia, China, what these colleagues were experiencing in their day-to-days. And so I think having that creating spaces for regional awareness is incredibly important, and also ensuring that, leaders don't just, all of us are guilty of, thinking about or seeing things in the way that we're trained to with our brains, right? And our exposure. So it's about ensuring that, when we think of different topics, we're seeing it through multiple lenses. So again, last week I was at a conference and we were discussing national security. And what was incredibly evident to me was, that doesn't just mean, defense systems. Like what that means is environmental security, health security, food security, as Catherine was just speaking to, economic security. All of these factors are incredibly important, and we really need to do our best to understand these factors. And then on top of sort of, just the complexity of all of these different ecosystems sort of coming together, we do find ourselves as humans at the moment in a very, no doubt complex geopolitical environment where there's increasing volatility, increasing uncertainty. And again, I believe that that just means that, it's again, it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we're doing our best to navigate that uncertainty and complexity. And again, I think the best way to do that is through knowledge and through awareness. And, someone also recently said that, in the space sector, complexity is just a ticket to entry. It's a price of entry to working in space. It's incredibly complex. We have to learn how to move with that. But indeed, when we're working with complex environments, it really reveals clear opportunities and clear needs to us. And again, I think that comes back to the impact factor of what we're talking about. We can only truly address, we can only find the solutions if we truly understand the problems. And that's where we need to be really focusing on creating those avenues of awareness for the people who are sort of in the driver's seat. So, I've seen this, on multiple occasions translate into direct action. Again, taking that step from awareness to action, where we've seen that, once our leaders start to really understand, again, something that Catherine just spoke about in terms of the end user. We had a fellow based in India who had this incredible sort of platform using AI and machine learning to translate critical satellite data into actionable, sort of workable solutions for businesses, so very much B2B, but hadn't considered, okay, how can that get into the hands of everyday farmers in India who rely on critical weather data sets? How can we really take that step to make this understandable, increase sort of the literacy around how to use that data to ensure that it's actionable? So as a result of him, really coming to that understanding through engagement with the fellows, then he created an entire platform that he open sourced that's now serving millions of farmers across South India. And then likewise, I've seen it sort of go through fellows creating opportunities, those who are in more privileged positions, ensuring that those from sort of developing or emerging ecosystems can have access to platforms that traditionally they didn't have access to. And I just think that once we start to really pay attention to that cross-sectoral awareness and cross-regional awareness, then that is how we can ensure that people who are in decision-making positions can very tangibly, concretely start to open doors for their colleagues, across the world. And yeah, it's the more complex the world becomes, the more we need to be proactive in terms of increasing that awareness. And again, I said in the beginning, I believe deeply in intellectual humility. And I think that, space demands curiosity and it demands humility. And that's something that we really try to work with our leaders. No matter how accomplished you are in your field, there's always going to be more in space that you don't know than what you do know. And once you sort of lean into that, then you can find more and more opportunities to actually create action in a meaningful way.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we're going to now pivot into our next thing, which is creating access through collaboration. So I'm going to stay with you, Hannah, because in your leadership at the Carmen Project, you've built bridges across disciplines and regions. What does it take to foster meaningful access to opportunities at that global level?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we found is that it really, the best results come from trust. So when people trust each other, they are far, far more likely to embark on the types of high risk endeavors that our current environment demands, as I sort of just spoke about. So, that starts with, first and foremost, making people feel safe, ensuring that we can create spaces, whether that's leveraging things like the Chatham House rule, or similar mechanisms to ensure that people feel ready and safe to share their experiences, share, the challenges that they're facing, but also importantly to dream together. So, just creating those spaces where people, no matter what the geopolitical reality is, finding the commonalities among leaders and among, people who just care deeply about the future of space. So again, really bringing it back to that very human level. And once you sort of start to create those safe spaces, people do start to open up and you start to build trust. And again, I believe that the best way to build trust is to embark on projects together, even if they're a small sort of first proof of concept type project. Once people start working on things together, that's how they get to know sort of the true character of their colleagues across the world. And again, if you look back in history, I would say that everything sort of it comes down to trust in terms of either the most significant advances that we've been able to make together. Again, on the space context, if you look at a project like the International Space Station, that really happened because people were in the driver's seat and people were able to say, look, okay, let's come together, let's do our best to overcome whatever sort of bureaucracy we're all working within and create something that we know will serve generations to come. And it was really sort of pushing that and finding that those common threads and those avenues. So, trust is sort of the catalyst for the most meaningful projects that we can create as humans. And importantly, an absence of trust is also where we see the breakdown. That's where we see more catastrophic consequences. So again, when it comes to fostering sort of meaningful opportunities globally, I fundamentally believe that that starts by approaching things at a very human level. The world moves between people, one conversation at a time. And I think the best thing that we can do is to create spaces for people to speak freely. Again, we need to be cognizant of the geopolitical realities of the world. We need to respect the facts of the various topics that we're dealing with. But ultimately, meaning comes from, dedicated safe spaces and communities. And that's something that I've really tried to lean into in terms of building those bridges together with, of course, my colleagues across the foundation.
Fantastic. Thank you. President Amina, throughout your career as a scientist, president, and global advocate, you've modeled how collaboration can unlock doors. Could you share a moment where strategic partnership helped create access to new possibilities?
Thank you. I think I totally subscribe to what Hannah has said on the issue of trust. Uh, and that has undergirded my career right from the word go. Because I'll start from that level. Because when I was interviewing all these old ladies on the recipes, usually people do not share anything because they consider to be family secrets, and all that is heirloom kind of approach. And when I got that information, I did not keep it for myself. It was not somewhere in a database somewhere. I published it and I put it back into the public domain. And that was very important because this was kind of the pedestal on which I could actually go back to the community and say, look, this is what you have given me. That belongs to you. And interestingly, the fact that I put that in the public domain, it has now become a prior art vis-a-vis the property organization, the WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization. And the fact that it's been there now for over 20 years means that anybody who wants to actually come and work on our biodiversity will have to adhere to all the SAN convention. And it's a win-win because they get precious information and the community also gets something for the concept of benefit sharing. And through partnership, I mean, again, when I set up my company, it was precisely through a holding company. And of course, partnership was key because I could then work with various pillars of the company. And when I was bringing projects from outside, which of course to bring the scientific framework around, for example, a recipe, which people wanted actually to bring to the market, I had to collaborate with all my partners. So collaboration has been key, cooperation has been key, but more importantly, I think the right one cuts across is the issue of trust. And in fact, nowadays, if you look at the development of AI and AGI, whatever it is, the centrality of the success of all these technologies will rest precisely on trust. So this is fundamental, and I think this is the way going forward. And also collaboration matters so much. When you look at a publication in Nature or in Science, you find that half a page is about 40 authors. So that also really belies the very essence of having trust in a team so that you can share information. And this is the way going forward.
Thank you so much. Well, this has been an incredible session. And as we close, I'd like to ask each of our thought leaders, what is one message or insight you hope our audience carries with them about leadership or purpose or about the future of space and society? President Amina, I'd love to get your closing thoughts.
For me, well, you've done a lot of work on space, Shelli. This is something which is so important nowadays going forward. And we have seen so much which has come out from the space technology, of course, to our everyday life. But at a very, very small micro level, I think the way forward for young girls, for young people like Catherine and Hannah, is believe in yourself. Be passionate about what you do. Adopt Confucius philosophy, which means that you're passionate about what you do, you will not have to work a single day in your life, and that has been my way going forward. And more importantly, believe that while you're going through that dark tunnel, there will be light at the end of the tunnel. So never ever give up, because when you give up, you actually play into the hand of the oppressor.
Fantastic closing thoughts. Thank you so much. Dr. Catherine, what's your one closing message for our audience?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think for me, a clear message or a clear opportunity is that creativity, solutions, ingenuity can come from anywhere. And in the space sector, which seems absolutely crazy technical, and you might need to learn a lot of things and offer a lot, as is assumed, I think is a misconception. And there is room for growth, there's room for opportunity. And a person like me, if I'd one day when I was 5 thought that I could be an astronaut, maybe I wouldn't have been the kind of scientist that I am today. And so just the thing is that there is room for everybody, and a lot of creativity exists in a lot of spaces that, some of us might not think is where the creativity will come from. And I share this because one of my favorite projects called Helmets Labeling Crops, which is Google's street crops, actually only exists, has only been successful beyond measure because we've worked with farmers, motorcycle taxi drivers who came up with really smart ways about how we can keep the devices charged as they drive. We're able to go in directions and places we would never have been able to if we were doing it, within my research group. So just to say that such an incredible opportunity and project has succeeded just purely because we were open to learn from everybody. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Well, Hannah, we'd love to hear your closing thoughts.
Of course, and I just want to echo my thanks for speaking with us today and hearing everyone's experiences. It's been so enlightening to hear from Catherine and Dr. Amina. So, look, for me, I would just say that in this moment when we are working across increasingly complex geopolitical divides, I think it's more important than ever to lean into what commonalities we have. I think science is an incredibly powerful tool for diplomacy, and I think that that's been shared in many different ways throughout the examples that our colleagues have shared here today. And exactly as Catherine just said, it's about people just being open to learning and to discovering new opportunities. And again, for me, that always comes back to people. So I think that this is best captured by, there's this anecdote that was shared by Jean-Jacques Dordain, who's on our board at the foundation, and he was a former Director General of the European Space Agency. And he tells a story about, when he was speaking at his colleague, Mike Griffin, who was the Associate Administrator of NASA, it was his retirement. And Jean-Jacques tells a story that, in his speech, he said, you know what, it hasn't always been easy to work with NASA. In fact, it's often not easy to work with NASA, but it has always been easy to work with Mike. And I just think that that is one of the most simple, clear, powerful messages that we can remember is that, we need to find the people who will be our advocates, who will go on these journeys with us and who will push things forward. So I guess my message to everyone is, go out there and find your mic, find the people across potential, bureaucratic environments or geopolitical divides who will just go with you and push things forward for the benefit of, your sector, humanity, whatever it is that you're really trying to push forward. Again, I think it really comes down to people and relationships and the way that we shape those. And yeah, so that would be sort of my final thought and call to action to everybody.
Well, thank you so much. This has been an incredibly powerful session. I want to thank you all for joining this conversation in our Interstellar Insight series. Today, we had the honor of learning from 3 extraordinary global change makers who embody the spirit of space-inspired leadership. We had President Amina reminding us that true leadership is grounded in service and science. Her journey from biodiversity to the presidency demonstrates how leading with integrity and vision can shape nations and uplift future generations. We had Dr. Catherine, who showed us how awareness becomes a force for equality and resilience. Her work translating data into impact, especially in the areas of food security and climate resilience, is a shining example of how science, heart, and purpose converge. And Hannah illuminated how access is about more than opportunity. It's about building systems of trust and cooperation that span borders and generations. And her leadership with the Carmen Project challenges us to lead boldly and inclusivity. Each of these leaders has shown us what it means to be a cosmic catalyst, and I want to thank them all. Thank you all so much for joining us. So, as our audience leaves this session today, I invite you to carry one insight forward, something that moved you, challenged you, or gave you clarity. Maybe it's the reminder that self leadership starts now, not later. Maybe it's a renewed commitment to mentoring others, designing access, or leading with purpose in your own sphere of influence. Whatever it is, don't wait. Take that insight and put it into motion today. This is just the beginning of the Interstellar Insights series. Over the coming sessions, we'll explore the foundational pillars of the book, which is leadership, awareness, access, and action through the voices of global changemakers who are building the future every day. Until next time, I'm Shelli Brunswick, and I look forward to seeing you around the galaxy.